Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on a really fascinating journey. We're looking into a source that gives these profound insights into faith, resilience, and, well, divine mercy. We are diving deep into profound lessons from Surah Maryam. Now, for those of you maybe less familiar, Surah Maryam is the 19th chapter of the Holy Quran. It's got 98 verses, and it holds a really unique distinction.
It really does. What's quite striking, I think, is that it's the only surah, the only chapter in the entire Quran named after a woman, Mary or Maryam. I mean, her name itself appears 34 times throughout the Quran. So dedicating a whole chapter to her story, that's a profound recognition of her piety, her strength within the Islamic tradition. It sort of implicitly challenges those historical narratives, that have sometimes marginalized women in religious discourse.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. So a chapter named after Mary, it focuses on her story, but also other prophets too. What's the big picture here? What's the overall purpose of this deep dive for you, our listener?
Yeah. Well, our mission really is to extract the wisdom from Surah Maryam. It presents both glad tidings and warnings, and these are woven into these really compelling stories of different prophets. The surah's main focus, and this is typical of Meccan chapters, it revolves around the fundamentals of faith, the hereafter, the ultimate destiny of the righteous and the transgressors, and also those timeless narratives of figures like Zechariah, Mary herself, Jesus or Isaac, John, Yahya, Abraham, Ishmael, Ismail, and Idris. It's like a spiritual blueprint, really.
A spiritual blueprint for life.
Oh,
that sounds powerful. And to get this deep understanding, what sources are we leaning on? How are we approaching this?
Right. So this deep dive, it's built on a really comprehensive foundation. We've analyzed the original Arabic text, of course, and various English translations. We're drawing interpretive depth from classical exegeses, think Tafsir Ibn Kathir, Al-Tabari, but also alongside modern scholarly commentaries like Madudi, Al-Sadi, Said Qutb's Fi Zilal al-Quran. And we're integrating authentic hadith, too, from collections like Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. That gives us further context, validation. It's a multi-sourced approach, definitely, trying to be really well-informed.
That does sound truly multi-sourced.
Yeah.
So with all that material, what's the core thread? What runs through all these different stories in Surah Maryam? What's the kind of the central idea?
If you want to connect it all, I'd say a central theme is definitely the manifestation of Allah's boundless mercy. You often see his attribute, Ar-Rahman, used, the most gracious, the most merciful. And this divine mercy, it's shown so vividly through miracles that just defy, conventional understanding, like the births of Yahya and Isa. It points to a core life lesson, I think, recognizing and trusting in Allah's all-encompassing mercy that goes beyond what we think is possible and can bring good from, totally unexpected places. The Surah also really emphasizes pure monotheism, Tawhid refuting any idea of partners or offspring with Allah, and it highlights the certainty of resurrection and accountability. Big themes.
That's a powerful foundation. Okay, let's start with the first story then, the first narrative we find in Surah Maryam. Prophet Zakariya and the birth of Yahya begins with this profound invocation, doesn't it? A recital of the mercy of thy Lord to his servant Zakariya. Tell us about Zakariya's prayer. What was his situation?
So, Prophet Zakariya, he was advanced in age, his wife was barren, yet he secretly, earnestly prayed to his Lord. His prayer, it's detailed in verse 4, he acknowledges his physical frailty. He says, infirm indeed are my bones, and the hair of my head doth glisten with gray. But then right after that, he expresses this unwavering conviction in Allah's response. But never am I unblessed, O my Lord, in my prayer to thee. It really shows the impact of sincere, continuous prayer, even when things look utterly impossible. It's about radical trust, isn't it?
That's remarkable sincerity. But was his concern just personal, or was there something more to it?
Oh, not at all, just personal. Zechariah's concern went way beyond that. He feared for the spiritual continuity of his lineage, specifically the posterity of Jacob. He was seeking an heir who would inherit prophethood, religious knowledge, not just, worldly stuff, not wealth. And Tafsir Ibn Kathir actually clarifies this. Prophets don't leave wealth as inheritance, it becomes charity. So it really emphasizes the value placed on spiritual heritage. It suggests his consistent righteous conduct, his deep relationship with Allah. You could say he'd built up a lot of equity with Allah that directly contributed to his prayers being answered.
So what was the divine response to this heartfelt plea? How did it happen?
Allah granted him the glad tidings, the good news, of a son named Yahya. And that name, Yahya, was unique. Bestowed upon him, never given to anyone before. Zechariah's first reaction? Well, it was human astonishment, wasn't it? How could this happen, given their age? But the divine reply through the angel was simple, powerful. It is easy for me. Just completely reaffirming Allah's absolute power, able to transcend any perceived impossibility.
Wow. And Yahya himself, what kind of person was he, born from such a miracle?
Yahya's birth was truly unique, and from a young age he was divinely given these exceptional qualities. He was granted wisdom even as a youth. Apparently, his understanding of Scripture surpassed scholars of his time. Allah gave him pity for all creatures as from us, and purity, which signifies this inherent compassion he had and freedom from sins. He's described as devout, righteous.
Sounds like a remarkable example for us. What key lessons can we draw from his character, especially thinking about his parents?
Well, a really significant aspect was his conduct towards his parents. He was dutiful towards his parents, and he was neither an arrogant nor disobedient. That just hammers home a core Islamic ethical principle, doesn't it? Filial piety, respect for parents. Yahya was also commanded to hold fast the Scripture with might, which indicates, the need for firm adherence to divine revelation, actively embracing it. And the surah finishes this section saying, "Peace be on him the day he was born, the day he dies, and the day he will be raised up to life again." Unwhite. Those three moments, birth, death, resurrection, they're like the most vulnerable transitions in human life. So this implies profound, continuous divine care and security for the righteous.
That offers powerful reassurance, definitely. Okay, now let's shift our focus. Let's turn to the narrative of Maryam, the woman the surah is named after, and the miraculous birth of Isa, Jesus. The narrative shifts to Maryam. She's presented as this paragon of purity, of devotion. What does her initial action, withdrawing, tell us about spiritual discipline?
Right. She withdrew in seclusion from her family, went to a place facing east, created a private space for her worship by putting up a screen. This act, it really highlights her deep commitment to spiritual discipline, seeking closeness to Allah. It shows real spiritual independence. And her exceptional piety, her pure life, that directly led to her being chosen by Allah for the divine purpose. It demonstrates how spiritual excellence can attract these extraordinary blessings.
And it was in this secluded state, this state of devotion, that something completely unexpected happened, right?
Yes, exactly. Allah sent his angel, Gabriel, and he appeared before her looking exactly like a man in all respects. Maryam naturally feared ill intent. She immediately sought refuge with Allah. She reminded the man essentially to fear God. "I seek refuge from thee to God, most gracious. Come not near, if thou dost fear God." This is actually presented as a kind of legislative defense against evil. It teaches that Allah protects those who turn to him, especially when vulnerable.
And then Jibril reveals who he is and gives her this incredible news. What was the news, and what was her immediate, very human reaction?
Jibril then clarified, "I am only a messenger from thy Lord to announce to thee the gift of a holy son." Maryam's reaction, pure astonishment, understandably. "How can I have a son when no man has touched me, nor am I unchaste?" It defies logic, but the divine response just reiterated Allah's absolute power again. "So it will be," your Lord said. "That is easy for me. And we wish to appoint him as a sign to mankind and a mercy from us, Allah, and it is a matter already decreed by Allah." It just emphasizes the miraculous nature of creation, Allah's omnipotence, and it teaches believers, the importance of accepting divine will. Complete submission, even when it seems impossible or totally defies human reasoning.
Right, and here's where it gets really intense. Maryam, facing this impossible situation, gives birth alone. What happens during this incredibly vulnerable time for her?
So after conception, Maryam withdrew again to a remote place. The pains of childbirth drove her to the trunk of a date palm tree. And in that moment of extreme distress, she expressed this profound human despair. She wished she had died before this and had been forgotten and out of sight. It shows the intense struggles even the most pious people can face.
It's raw humanity.
Absolutely. But then immediate divine comfort arrived. A voice scholars debate if it was Jibril or the infant Isa himself reassured her. "Grieve not, your Lord has provided beneath you a stream. And shake the trunk of date palm towards you, it will let fall fresh ripe dates upon you." This miraculous provision, food and water, right when she needed it most, it just underscores Allah's immediate personal care. She was also told to vow a fast of silence if she encountered anyone.
That's such a powerful display of divine support in her absolute lowest moment. But then she has to return. She comes back to her people with the infant and faces accusations, right?
What happens then? Yes, upon returning, she was met with just severe condemnation. "O Mary, indeed you have brought a thing, Faria, like an unheard of, mighty, terrible thing. O sister of Aaron, your father was not a man of evil, nor was your mother unchaste." They're basically accusing her of the worst. Maryam, though, sticking to her vow of silence, just pointed to the infant. And then the miracle unfolds. The infant Isa spoke. From the cradle, he immediately declared who he was and his mission. Indeed, I am a servant of Allah. He has given me the scripture and made me a prophet, and He has made me blessed wherever I am, and has enjoined upon me prayer and zakah as long as I remain alive, and made me dutiful to my mother, and He has not made me a wretched tyrant.
Wow, speaking from the cradle. That's about as irrefutable a vindication as you can get.
Yeah.
What does Isa's very first speech teach us?
Exactly. It was irrefutable proof of Maryam's innocence and Isa's divine mission. It shows that Allah will, in the end, vindicate the righteous. And His very first words, they laid out this comprehensive model of righteous character, a timeless blueprint, really, for believers on how to embody humility, devotion, filial piety, being good to your mother. And Isa finished by proclaiming, "And peace is on me the day I was born, and the day I will die, and the day I am raised alive," affirming his status as a creature of Allah, destined for life, death, and resurrection like all humans.
Beyond the miracle of his birth, his speech, what does Surah Maryam clarify about Isa's actual nature? Because obviously there were and are disputes about that.
Yes, the Quran is very explicit here. It states, "That is Jesus, the son of Mary, the word of truth about which they are in dispute." Allah emphatically refutes the claim that He has a son, declares Himself far exalted above such an idea. His absolute power is stated again with the command be, and it is, showing He can create anything effortlessly. And Isa himself, remember, in that cradle speech, commanded his people to worship Allah alone. He affirmed Allah as His Lord and their Lord, and stated unequivocally, that is the straight path. This powerfully reinforces that core Islamic principle of Tawheed, the absolute oneness of God. It teaches believers the paramount importance of safeguarding this fundamental truth from any kind of distortion or polytheism.
That seems incredibly clear. But this raises a crucial point.
Yeah.
Despite these clear explanations, these signs, did people just accept this truth?
Well, no. The surah notes that the sects differed about Isa. And this leads to severe warnings for those who disbelieve. Warnings about the Day of Judgment. It shows that even with undeniable signs, explicit statements, people can still fall into serious theological errors. The severe warning against attributing a son to Allah really underscores the immense spiritual danger involved in theological misinterpretations and innovations. On that day, the day of resurrection, disbelievers will see and hear clearly, but it'll be too late. They were in plain error during their worldly lives. The verses issue this solemn warning of the day of grief and regrets when everything is decided. Contrasting it with the carelessness and disbelief now, ultimately Allah will inherit the earth and all thereon, and everyone returns to Him for judgment.
Right, so we see this pattern. Divine mercy, powerful affirmation of monotheism. The surah then moves on to other prophets. What lessons do we find in the story of Prophet Abraham?
The surah recounts Ibrahim's story, highlights him as a truthful prophet, and his interaction with his father, who worshipped idols, serves as this profound lesson in dawah calling to Allah. Ibrahim addressed his father with remarkable tenderness, respect. He kept using the affectionate term, "Oh, my father." It's a systematic approach filled with love, humility. It really outlines a timeless strategy for calling others to truth, emphasizing patience and wisdom.
And what was his core argument against the idols? How did he try to reason with his father?
He logically questioned his father's worship of idols, pointed out their inherent powerlessness. They neither hears nor sees nor can in any way avail you. They can't do anything. He asserted his own divine knowledge, invited his father to follow him on the straight path, and warned him against obeying Shaitan, Satan. He even expressed this compassionate fear that his father might face divine torment if he didn't change.
Such a gentle, logical approach. How did his father react?
Well, despite Ibrahim's gentle logic, his father responded harshly. Threats of stoning, banishment, get out. Ibrahim, though, maintained his composure. He replied with, "Peace be on you." And he promised to seek forgiveness for his father, acknowledging Allah's kindness to him personally. This teaches believers something crucial. You have to uphold core religious principles, the truth of Tawheed, absolutely. But you should still strive to maintain respect and compassion towards family members, even if they hold very different beliefs.
So, Ibrahim makes this huge decision. He separates himself for Allah's sake. What was the outcome? How was he compensated for that steadfast?
Ultimately, yes, he declared his disassociation from his father and their idols. He expressed hope that his own prayers to Allah would be answered. And as a direct result of that unwavering commitment, that separation for Allah's sake, Allah compensated him, gave him righteous children, Ishaq, Isaac, and Yaqub, and Jacob, both of whom became prophets. It emphasized a really powerful divine principle. Sacrifices made in Allah's path, even painful ones like leaving family or comfort, they will be met with greater blessings, often unexpected, enduring divine compensation.
The surah then briefly highlights some other key prophets. What do their stories reinforce about the divine message? Is there a continuity?
Absolutely. After the detailed stories of Zechariah, Yahya, Maryam, and Isa, the surah emphasizes this continuity. Prophet Musa, Moses, is described as chosen, a messenger, a prophet who spoke directly with Allah. His brother Harun, Aaron, was also granted prophethood as a mercy from Allah to help Musa. Prophet Ishmael, is praised for being truthful in promise, a messenger and prophet who urged his family towards prayer and charity, earning Allah's pleasure. He's known as the keeper of promise. Prophet Enoch, is mentioned as truthful, a prophet raised to a high station. Tradition tells us he was wise, among the first to write with a pen, study astronomy. So yes, these narratives together underscore this enduring legacy of prophethood, of consistent divine guidance throughout history.
But it wasn't always followed. What the Surah points out a decline. What warning does it give about later generations?
Yes. In stark contrast to these righteous examples, the Surah gives a severe warning about a generation that came after them, a generation who abandoned prayers and followed their desires. This serves as a really critical reminder that spiritual neglect leads to deviation. It emphasizes that righteousness isn't guaranteed just by your lineage. It has to be actively pursued, maintained by every single generation. A timeless caution.
A powerful warning indeed for any time. Finally, the Surah brings us face to face with the ultimate reality: resurrection, accountability, divine justice. How does it address the human tendency to doubt life after death?
It directly addresses mankind's amazement, even disbelief, at the idea of being resurrected after turning to dust. Allah refutes this by reminding humanity of our initial creation from absolutely nothing. The argument is simple. If he could create you from non-existence the first time, then recreating you is certainly easier. It establishes divine omnipotence, God's absolute power, as the fundamental basis for resurrection. It's not difficult for him.
So, what does that accountability look like? Can you walk us through how the Surah describes that final journey?
The verses affirm that all beings, even the shayateen, the devils, will be gathered, brought around hell. Then, from every group, those who are worst in rebellion against Allah, they'll be dragged out first. And a really profound aspect described is that everyone will pass over hell. Traversing a bridge, the Sirat, sometimes likened to being sharper than a sword's edge. How fast you cross that bridge, that's determined entirely by your deeds in this life. Some might pass like lightning, others crawl slowly. Angels will be praying for the believer's salvation. It directly links your actions now to your passage then. After crossing, Allah saves those who had taqwa, piety, God consciousness, and leaves the wrongdoers behind in hell. There is mention of intercession being allowed for believers who committed major sins, but ultimately, their faith is the key factor for salvation.
What about those who boast about worldly success? People who think their wealth or status in this life means something in the next.
Oh yes, the Surah highlights that. The disbeliever's tendency to boast about their nice houses, their social gatherings, questioning the believer's simpler state. Allah counters this by reminding them of past generations. Generations destroyed despite being superior in wealth, goods, outward appearance. It shatters the illusion that worldly prosperity equals divine favor. There's even a specific incident mentioned involving Habab bin al-Arat and a disbeliever named Aizamin White, as boasted he'd get even more wealth and children in the hereafter. Allah declares he will record such boasts and actually increase their torment, and he will inherit everything they boasted about, leaving them to come before him completely alone. It shows false claims and disbelief lead to more suffering and underscores the absolute solitude of accountability. No possessions, no family can help you then.
And what about those who associate partners with Allah? What happens to those false gods or idols they relied on?
The Surah addresses the polytheist directly. Those who take other gods besides Allah may be thinking these idols will grant them honor or power. But on the Day of Judgment, these false gods will deny ever being worshipped. They'll become adversaries to their own worshippers. It reveals the complete futility of idolatry, of relying on anything other than the one true God. Allah also reveals He sends shayateen, devils, to incite disbelievers towards evil, leading them further astray. So on that day, the righteous, those with taqwa, they'll be gathered to Allah, the most gracious, like an honored delegation, while the criminals, the mujrimun, will be violently driven to hell, thirsty, desperate. And nobody will have the power of intercession except those who have permission or a covenant from Allah, which is linked to affirming His oneness.
The Surah concludes with this incredibly powerful statement about Allah's uniqueness, His absolute power. How is that emphasized?
It sternly, forcefully rejects the idea of Allah having a son. describes such a claim as a terrible thing. So terrible it almost causes the heavens to tear apart, the earth to split open, the mountains to crumble into dust. This imagery highlights the inherent reverence creation itself has for Allah's oneness. It's as if all creatures, except perhaps humans and jinn who have free will, are terrified by the very notion of associating partners with him. It's stated emphatically, it is not suitable for Allah's majesty to beget a son. All beings, everything in the heavens and earth, come to him as his slaves, his servants. Allah knows every single one, has counted them precisely, and every individual will come before him alone on the day of resurrection for judgment, utterly alone.
And for those who hold on to that oneness, who remain righteous, what's the reward mentioned here? Is it just other well,
No, it's interesting. Allah informs us that he instills love for his believing servants, those who do righteous deeds. He puts that love into the hearts of other righteous servants. This is actually supported by hadith, saying that when Allah loves someone, he tells Jibril, who then loves them, and then the inhabitants of the heavens love them, and finally, acceptance is put for them on earth. So it shows both social and spiritual aspects of divine love. Righteousness attracts not just divine affection, but human affection too from the right people. The Quran itself, the surah says, is made easy in Prophet Muhammad's tongue, his language, to give glad tidings to the righteous, those with taqwa, and to warn the luda, those who stubbornly deviate from truth. And the surah ends with this final, chilling reminder of the many generations destroyed before for their disbelief, emphasizing their complete annihilation, no trace, not even a whisper left of them.
wow. Okay, so bringing this all together, what does this mean for you, the listener, today? This deep dive into Surah Maryam, it's really unveiled this rich tapestry of lessons, hasn't it?
It really has. The surah consistently, page after page almost, underscores the pervasive nature of Allah's mercy, ar-Rahman. We see it manifest in these miraculous births, in unwavering support for the devout. And this emphasis, it encourages us to have unwavering trust in divine power, divine omnipotence, even when we face challenges that seem completely insurmountable. The stories of Zechariah, Yahya, Maryam, Isa, they provide such compelling models. Models of sincere prayer, being good parents, steadfastness through trials. They really illustrate that righteous conduct, actively engaging with divine knowledge. These are foundational for receiving divine favor and overcoming adversity.
And that miraculous vindication of Maryam and Isa speaking from the cradle, it powerfully affirms that truth will win out in the end. Even against an overwhelming social pressure or accusations, it reminds us that answers can come from the most unexpected places.
Absolutely. And furthermore, the surah meticulously upholds that principle of pure monotheism, tawheed, sternly refuting any deviation, any theological tinkering, the clear warnings about the day of judgment, that bridge over hell, the ultimate accountability for our actions. They serve as this constant reminder, don't they, of the transient nature of this worldly life and the absolute inevitability of the hereafter. The surah makes it crystal clear. Worldly success is not the measure of divine pleasure. True honor, true love, these are bestowed by Allah upon the righteous. In essence, Surah Maryam really provides a comprehensive guide. A guide for cultivating a purposeful life rooted in faith, resilience, and unwavering devotion.
The lessons we can derive from his verses, from the commentaries, they feel incredibly timeless, offering profound guidance for navigating our own personal struggles, for upholding truth even when it's unpopular, and for striving for a spiritual legacy that goes far beyond just material things.
Which I think raises an important question for you to reflect on. In this age of, well, constant information overload, maybe even cynicism, where do we look for sources of radical hope, of unshakable trust? How can these ancient stories of unwavering faith, of miraculous intervention, how can they empower us today to face our contemporary challenges with greater trust, greater purpose? How can they help us recognize the unseen forces potentially at play in our own lives, even when logic or the world around us tells us otherwise?
That's definitely something to mull over, something to think about until our next deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey through Surah Maryam.